uh, session for data architecture. We'll get started now. Sorry for the delay in getting started. So, as usual, we'll start with a quick round of a mind empowerment technique. I see some few new names. Jaideep, is this your first session?
Yeah, this is my first session.
Okay. Jaideep, you might find uh, things a little going over above the head because you're joining in between, but that's not a problem. We have some of the recordings. I think they are published on YouTube. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask any questions. I'll just briefly introduce what we are, why we do what we do. So we are the IT wing for Raj Yoga.
Yes, yes.
I think I got dropped off. So this is the 10th session, and we'll be covering theory a little bit more theory for a few sessions. And after that, we will do practical case studies and we'll review the series as well. So each of you can use this knowledge and practically use it in your field. With that, we'll start with a mind empowerment technique. So in the past, last week we covered a simple perspective of how we view at life, and that simple perspective is that everything that happens is because of God, attitude of gratitude. Everything that bad happens is because of my own fault. Usually we put it reverse way. Everything that good happens is because of my effort. Everything bad that happens is because of others. And we discussed with that perspective, your mind will keep fluctuating and you're not going to progress in life. So if you invert it, everything good that happens is because of God, attitude of gratitude, and everything that bad happens is because of some shortcoming in you. So you have to introspect and get better. Try it out. That will bring newness in your life and take you to greater heights. Right? So we discussed that last week. Today we'll discuss another one. Is that whatever we right, we have to keep God as a companion. And the reason is because we do a lot of hard work. We take too much upon ourselves and we think everything we have to do. And this I is the whole cause of problem, because that I isolates us. I, for my perspective of I am alone, and I is also for isolation. It makes you believe that you are alone and you have to do everything. But actually, you have a secret, invisible companion who is helping you along all the way. You just have to accept and understand it, that there is an invisible force trying to help you. And the advantage with that is, when problems and challenges come in life, you believe that they're seriously with you and supporting you. Otherwise, you will think, this problem is too big for me and I cannot solve it. But you tell the problem that my invisible secret companion is invisible, no one can see it, but is bigger than the problem itself. So there's no problem that you cannot solve, because you're not alone. And the world's creator, the world director of this drama, which has written this drama, is everything is perfect. And even you see the imperfection in it, that imperfection is temporary, meant to benefit you. This is the time where there will be a lot of destruction, there will be a lot of violence, there will be wars, and there will be calamities and natural calamities as well, and more so will happen. But that is intentional by design. It is meant to happen. This drama is perfect. What you need to take away from it is that you're not alone. Whatever happens happens for the good. Whatever that doesn't seem just, whatever that doesn't look right, whatever looks bad, whatever looks imperfect, there is perfection in it. You just have to wait and watch. In Hindi, there's a proverb, it says maluka mort, maluka shikar. In English, what it means is, when there is destruction happening, there are two perspectives to it. One person sees it merely as destruction and says, what a terrible drama it is. What a terrible way. This is not right. There's destruction happenings. And what is being destroyed is also saying the same thing. I'm being destroyed, and say this is. But there's another perspective to it. The other perspective is, after destruction, there is new creation. This is the law of nature. This is how nature goes as well. So there are rainforest fires as well. When one tree falls, it gives life to a lot of different life forms as well. And it makes the rainforest very beautiful, because new life forms come as well. So these things will happen, wars will go on, but everything is happening perfectly. What you have to think is that you are not alone. There is a secret, invisible force guiding you, supporting you, wanting to help you. All you have to do is just accept that help, and believe that with confidence, with faith, that you are not alone. Because when you realize the power, combined power of you and his power together, there's nothing that is unachievable. There's nothing that you cannot do, because your powers are then amplified. Practically, what that means is, you're learning a new skill. You're joining a session in the middle of it as well. No big deal. Nothing is impossible. Nothing is difficult. There's no problem that you cannot solve, because in reality, you are not the one who's solving it. You are mere an instrument who is solving it. So, with that perspective, and with that empowers the mind tremendously. Anytime you have a problem, sit in silence for 30 seconds, 1 minute. Just remind yourself that you are a soul, and there's one relationship which is indestructible throughout ages, throughout time, and the only truth, because that does not change with time, and that is your relationship with the Supreme Soul. So there's no problem that you cannot solve. There's no situation that you cannot overcome. There's nothing that you would make you feel helpless, because there is help all the way. Now, and sometimes Help will come in the form of people, other people helping you, will come in terms of a stranger helping you. But you have to see who was behind that stranger. You don't have to see the people. You have to see the hand of God trying to help you. That way, you're not stuck with that one individual trying to help you, because that individual is just a mere of means of helping you. It's not really that individual. It is that supreme soul trying to help you through an individual. The supreme soul does not have its own body, so it's going to use some instrument to help you. So if you are getting that help, see God's hand in that as well, because it's just his way of helping you. So with that my empowerment technique, you'll never feel lost, you'll never feel alone, you'll never feel that this problem is too big for you to solve. I encourage you to try it out and share your feedback if that helps. So we'll get started with today's session. As usual, we'll do a quick round of revision. Last week, Ashish shared a beautiful picture, which was a summary of last week. And Ramesh and Anita have shared in the previous week good summaries of the session. So I want to make sure if there's anyone else who wants to summarize, because you're going to learn a lot every week. But what is important is how much you retain it. So that way you can fluently talk about this data architecture. So anyone else who wants to volunteer this week and talk about and quickly summarize what we talked last week.
Dr. Mukesh, let me try from
And
my
you don't
end.
have to remember everything. Yeah, just one or two is also whatever you remember, that is good enough, because that will refresh your memory. Yes, Tapesh.
Yes. So last week we have seen about the transformation, what kind of transformation we are transferring the data using flat file format, using like flat file XML format and JSON format is over there. And also we have looked for like REST APIs kind of thing. Means if we are talking about REST means web services, how can we fetch that data from that our REST APIs? And also we have seen like some gateway API gateway means the services handled by that API gateway, like APIs is over there from AWS, APIs is over there. uh, and other is also means graph API is over there. We have seen like this one.
Very good, Tapesh. Anyone else wants to add anything?
And also we have seen some Azure services like Data Factory and Data Lake. For that one, we have seen that one also. We have discussed about that one.
Yeah, that's right.
And if
Uh,
not anybody
yes,
else would
Ashish.
like to add, then probably I can add. Like the page has shared, uh, like discussed what is the need for data movement and transformation, and where all we can share the data between our different transactional, operational, and analytical systems. And what's the location, like I think on-prem or cloud or to the vendor suppliers. And primarily two things are main. One is that how we are sharing. One is file-based, and the another is service-based. File-based is file-based is through FTP,
Next, for
SFTP,
a phone,
and
yeah, mine phone. Yeah, sorry. Keep
yeah,
going, Ashish.
sorry. Yeah. So file-based or this service-based. File-based we transfer to or like FTPS or SFTP. And, related tools are there, and formats are like flat files and heavily industry file format, which is called IFF. Latest trend in healthcare is FHIR, fast healthcare interop resource. If industry standard is there, you use that standard for different, and like for financial or healthcare. So that's more preferable. Otherwise, flat files are used. And another important one also is the service based, which is more real time and more cost effective. And the analogy is like client server based, wherein in a restaurant, a visitor is coming and the restaurant is serving based on particular demand in real time. And there are different type of web services or API you can call. Previously, it was web service using SOAP, XML over HTTP, came the RESTful APIs, and the latest trend is GraphQL, is more query language API, and it a specific set of data from a large data set, saves time using multiple RESTful API calls. It's more trending and coming up. And then these API, how they get published or managed. All APIs are published on the API gateway, which are securely accessible and authenticated. Every consumer needs to subscribe to the API key and then access the API from the gateway. And API gateway manages all these API management. And tools are there like from Google, from Azure, and API gateway from AWS. Then we discuss broadly how earlier data transformation was happening in through ETL and same kind of restrictions to ESB tools, but they got evolved over over time. And they are now capable of handling more data in GBs and more orchestration based. So now it's more orchestration. Data transformation is more equal to orchestration, and wherein two type of orchestration are happening. One is like BPM tools, wherein manual plus automation is happening, and another one is full automation, which is more managing all these ETL and in through visual process management. And ETL and ESB tools are have the combined capabilities in orchestration tools, and those are obviously giving your access for real timing or streaming data also. Example is like IBM Data Stage and Azure Data Factory. Similarly, AWS Glue for ETL and step functions for ESB are there.
Yeah, that's good enough for Ashish. So I would strongly urge you to take to it. If you have to take notes, that's fine. But the whole objective is remembering as much as possible. So if you can talk about 2 minutes, that's great. So let's get started with new learnings today. So there are a few topics related with data integration that I wanted to cover today. So as Ashish was mentioning, right, last week we covered, there are primarily, we discussed two in which you can share information. One is you are sharing batch information through files. And if it's external vendor, or even if it's internal, some of the systems, you can share it through FTP, right? And there are various SFTP softwares. They're very cheap. There's managed file transfer, MFT, but that's nothing but an SFTP software where you can have automatically one system write files, create in a folder, but you can manually upload them as well. So when you're doing it manually, you need a portal that's called a managed file transfer, because you're manually managing moving the files. You're picking which file up. But most of the time, it is straight through processing called STP, where your system is automatically generating the files and dropping off the files. Because the whole objective of IT is automation. So if you're doing things manually, then it's defeating the purpose, right? So you would have an ETL tool connect to a database or connect to your system, generate the files and drop off in a file folder for SFTP, in a SFTP file folder. So that way it can be sent to the files. And this process occurs on a daily basis. So there are different schedulers. Scheduler is nothing but a software which at a particular time will trigger a certain job or will trigger an ETL process which will go and write a query, pick up extract the data from a database, do data transformation and create a file in a particular file format. So you can create CSV file that way and drop it off in a SFTP folder. So the entire process of sending data, creating that file, everything is automated, no human involved. So that's how these files are created. So that was one way we discussed. The other way was we took an example of Make My Trip and Yatra.com, where we are pulling information. So if you want to show what are the competitive fares from different websites, your website, let's say you building a site like Make My Trip, you will do an orchestration. You will scatter that information saying all these 5 airlines, give me the information, and you'll gather it and display it on the web page. So in that case, your application is a client to these airlines API. You are requesting it and you get the data back. What is important is you are pulling information by making the request. The API is provided by the airline and you are exposing that information. You are consuming that information that was exposed by the airline. Yeah. So you are pulling that information. Do you see any drawback with this approach where you are pulling the information? Is there any problem with that?
Any kind
Right.
of data is there, like structured, unstructured, semi-structured.
So this data which is uh, REST API is JSON, and JSON is semi-structured. Right. So one drawback to JSON is that you're not validating the data. If it was XML, your data would, if it was a SOAP server, you would validate it based on that XML schema. But because it's JSON, you're skipping that validation because you want this transaction to be fast. So that's why they are skipping the validation. Mobile app, they want it fast. So yes, that's one disadvantage. Anything else?
So, I mean, the problem in this approach is not based on it's based on what's your requirement. If it is just showing the rates, so then it's fine. But if you need something in real time or with streaming data or live, like we discussed the last time example, a visitor in the store, if you need that kind of a data, then we don't need to uh, pull kind of a mechanism. We need a push kind of a mechanism from the server so that we, as and when the event happens, so we get notified immediately instead we going there on a schedule basis.
Data is very big, so where we have to store.
You are always searching to see when the airline fare drops or what is the fare. So I have to search 2 or 3 times because the fare changes. It's usually cheaper at night, but then it changes. So if I look at it from an end user perspective, I'm constantly polling or I'm constantly pulling information from the website to see when it is the cheapest. Wouldn't it be great when you tell me this is the cheapest fare and I buy it? That will save my time. So instead of me polling it 3 times or 10 times in the day, you're telling me this is the cheapest fare. It won't get any cheaper than that. Or, based on the past trend, this is the cheapest so far. Do you want to buy the ticket? Or the fare has just dropped now. Do you want to buy the ticket? So you are telling me, instead of me waiting and asking that same question 3 times, you are giving me the information that I need, which is relevant to me. So as Ashish was saying here, I am pulling information from the airline websites. What if the airline wants to tell me that this information, this fare has dropped, right? Then I can communicate to my customers and tell them, look, this fare is dropping. This is the fire sale for this route. These cities, now is the best time to buy. But most of the time, you have to pull. I can't push that information. Technologically, or from an IT perspective, we need a way many times where you have to push information, right? So, for example, you have an appointment and you need an appointment reminder. So, you need a way where someone is sending you a notification. Someone is sending you the information and reminding you or saying, oh, the fare is dropped. Is this important to you? Is this relevant to you? So there needs to be a way where you are exchanging information in real time, but you're not pulling it. That server who's managing, who's the source of that information, is sending it to you, right? So in that we discussed the example of a restaurant where you are placing an order based on the menu in the restaurant, and the server or the web server is servicing that request from the kitchen. Here you go, you are in the vicinity of the restaurant, or the restaurant says, today is my special of the day. Do you want me to deliver it to you? Right. So that way, the so of course the protocol for it is different. Protocol is nothing of steps to achieve an outcome. So when the president of one country visits the president of another country, they follow a protocol. They'll lay out the red carpet, they will provide the military salute and so on. So protocol is nothing but a predetermined series of steps, sequence of steps that need to happen. President visits, they lay out the red carpet, the military salute, that is a protocol. So in IT, there are a lot of different protocols because you want to achieve automation. So you need to have those protocols. So that way that communication is happening in that precise sequence of steps. So there is another way to push information in real time, and that is called using web hooks. So if you want to push information externally, right, customer, and you want to push that information through your mobile app, you can use using web hooks, right? But if it's internal application, you've got one IT system, you've got a CRM system, you've got an ERP system where your inventory, you've sold out of inventory. You want to push that information so that it will show it on the website that this product is no longer available. Because if you don't do that, customers trying to buy it and say, sorry, product no longer available. Because you're pulling information out of the ERP, and ERP says no more inventory available. But if you want to push that, then we don't use webhooks. Webhooks is more for external communication between your client and the server. So in this case, you have a mobile app and you are pushing that notification or the webhook from the your server to that app, and that app is subscribing to those notification. You have to subscribe to it, and then you will be a recipient of it. But when it's internal, there's a different way to communicate. So it's very important from a data integration perspective, knowing this third way of communication where you are pushing information. This type of architecture is called event-driven architecture because you are not responding to a time-based event. You're responding to event as and when data changes happen. In the previous example, in the ETL, every day 10 o'clock, I have to send the file. So at a 10 o'clock timer, I'm using a software called a scheduler and creating that file and sending it to the vendor. But now I want to send that information real time internal to my system, but not at a time, but in a response to certain change in that data. And that change in the data is event. So the modern data strategy or the modern data architect is building event-driven systems where you're minimizing the data latency or you're minimizing the data lag in sharing information between two systems. Do you guys remember why do we want to minimize the data lag? Why are event-driven architectures more popular? Anyone wants to answer that? We briefly discussed, we gave an example. Why do you want to minimize data latency? Because now you're talking about a solution, how to minimize data latency. But why to minimize data latency? What difference does it make if data arrives 15 minutes or 1 hour late? Why do we need to do it in real time?
With sales, you
sorry?
use the example of Amazon that stock is in,
Yes.
there is plenty of stock and you can deliver the goods in time. Otherwise, latency could be a day, 2 days. So you want quick response.
Exactly, right? Because your shipment could have left for the day, whereas if you for the cutoff time, person would have got the shipment a day earlier. So you'll have a happy customer. You are building brand loyalty because they know you will send it on time and you send quicker. So Amazon says it will send you on Tuesday, but many times the product comes on Sunday or Monday itself. That creates a happy customer because you're always sending before time. Whereas other retailers, they are struggling to send it even on time. So in order to achieve that end state, it is important that we minimize that data lag, or we minimize the data latency. The When you're talking, don't use the word data lag. I'm just explaining to explain you why I'm saying data lag, but in IT terminology, we use the word latency. So to minimize the data latency, a good data architect will design an event-driven system which is minimizing the data latency, or sharing or minimizing the time lag between sharing information from one system to the other. And a good data architect will design an event-driven system where you're sharing the information not based on a schedule, but in response to change in some data or change in some event. Event could be you ran out of inventory. Event could be, you got surplus inventory. You determine that, right? Different type of events as such. So what is and if you want to exchange that information between external systems could be, your mobile app is a client and your server is which is communicating with that app, then you'll use webhooks. But if it's internal and you want to share it, there are two pieces of technology that you will use. One is CDC, change data capture, right? And I'll talk the other one after this. So what change data capture or CDC does is it's essentially telling you in a database when change is happening. So for example, you've got a customer table which has a lot of customer information, first name, last name, date of birth, zip code, so on. If anything changes for that customer, right, it will trigger an event. Anything, the customer changed the phone number, customer changed the address, customer changed anything in that table, any change which happens in any row in that table, CDC will detect that change and will say this row has changed, and it will publish that entire row as a JSON object. And if 10 rows have changed, it will publish those entire 10 rows as a JSON object. That's what a CDC tool does. So CDC tool, it's looking at a database log file, and as and when you're doing a database transaction, when you're running a SQL query or you're inserting records, it's updating this log file. So these CDC tools, they look at this log file, so it's non-intrusive. It's not taking a lot of CPU power and constantly polling for what has changed and so on. Because the old CDC tools, they didn't quite work well because they were actually running stored procedures periodically to know what has changed. The new way of doing it, which is the most efficient, is by looking at the database log to know what has changed and triggering that change as a JSON object. The most common tool to do that is there's a company called Qlik, and the name of that tool is Replicate. So you'll use a tool called Qlik Replicate, which will pretty much any database you have, right? Any data source you have, you can configure with the click of a button what has changed, and it will publish that as an edit. So that is CDC. Any questions so far?
Yeah, hi Mukesh. This CDC is how it's different from the earlier replication like in Microsoft SQL Server. It also, use log and replicate the information to other databases.
Yeah. So previously, the way previous old generation of CDC tools occurred was they used to have a stored proc, which will used to be triggered upon that change. But it was very intrusive. It used to take up a lot of CPU power, and that's why they weren't preferred, because many of these jobs are batch based. So if you're making a change in a batch, it would trigger a bunch of these stored proc. The same stored proc would trigger so many times in response to that batch event that it will slow down your database. And then some of these inserts won't work. So it used to compete with the performance of the database. So that's why the old way of CDC didn't quite work well because of the CPU performance overhead. So these new tools, they don't use any stored proc. They are not constantly looking at which table has changed by running some triggering a stored proc every 5 minutes or 2 minutes, or setting up what are called as triggers as such, because they consume a lot of CPU cycles. So that's why in the past recent year, there used to be a company called Attunity, and they came up with a way where you can publish events to the big data platform. And after that, CDC became very practical and everyone wanted to use it. And Attunity got acquired by this company called Qlik. So if you hear the word Attunity, and it is the same thing, because Attunity was acquired by Qlik. So after that, Qlik came out, Qlik acquired Attunity, and Attunity said, well, you don't have to worry about any impact performance. There is a performance, but the performance impact is 2% of the CPU, maximum is 5% of the CPU, which is negligible. Whereas the other way of doing it, it was a 20 plus overhead, 20 to 25% hit on the CPU, but you're constantly polling for it. So that's why companies shied away from it. There was another way to do CDC, and those were data replication tools. So there is a very well-known replication called Oracle Golden Gate. And essentially what it does is it's monitoring the entire hard disk on which your database is there. And if any section or any sector of that hard disk, when it change, it will publish that, and it will copy that onto another server. So this other server in which you were replicating the entire database. So it's not telling you which row has changed. It's basically propagating any changes occurred and making a replica or a copy of that database onto this other server by detecting any changes at the hardware level. So any change happens at that harder disk level, it will propagate that and copy it into that other server. And that's how Golden Gate did stuff. And there were different tools which did something similar. SharePlex, Dell or EMC Square's product has a called SharePlex. It did something very similar, but they're very expensive. Informatica, we discussed, there's another company called Informatica. They have a lot of data related tools. Their best ETL tool, Informatica Power Center, is very popular. So Informatica has a lot of data related tools. They also have a CDC tool as well, but very expensive. So unless and until you need it, organizations didn't consider CDC as a first class choice. So it was something like you've got a lot of money and it's really absolutely critical and needed for your application, then only you will do it. Otherwise, you won't do it. So it was a very expensive way of doing it. But with Qlik, the cost is so low that you don't have to worry about the cost, and there's no CPU performance. And most important, it's not replicating the entire database, but it's detecting a change at the record level, which then allows you to say, what should I do with this? Should I ignore it, or should I, what should I do with it? So it really empowers how you use those change data events. Following the trend in this with Qlik Replicate, most of the database providers now provide change data capture capabilities as a native out-of-the-box capability. It comes with the database. Previously didn't. That's why these tools were popular, because this capability wasn't provided by the database software manufacturer, right? You had to use a separate tool to do it. Now, most of these database software vendors, they provide that as an out-of-the-box capability. So if you've got just one database and it already has that capability, you shouldn't recommend Qlik Replicate because it already comes with that capability. So why recommend using another tool when you really don't need it and your database does the same thing? NoSQL database now is very recently, since the last year or so, have started providing change data capture capabilities. Previously, they didn't. So MongoDB also has CDC capabilities. Cosmos DB also has the CDC capabilities. So it's a question of, if the database vendor doesn't provide, and if Qlik supports that, then that's something you want to look at it. Or if you've got an entire Oracle-based stack, right? Everything is Oracle database. Then, instead of looking at the Qlik Replicate, you may want to look at Golden Gate, because Golden Gate works perfectly with Oracle products, because it's an Oracle product meant and designed with Oracle products, but it does support other databases as well. But again, very expensive, and previously didn't support big data. Nowadays it does. So things are constantly evolving and changing. So you always have to read the documentation before you make a recommendation to validate that what you're saying is true, because your past knowledge will get obsolete in a few months or in a year or so. So always double check before you make a recommendation. Any questions so far? Ashish, did I answer your question?
Okay.
So with Qlik Replicate and with these other tools, we know we can detect what has changed. But these tools are just raising an event. It's just saying, okay, this is JSON object. This is what has changed. You still need to send it to that other system, right? So there's another capability, a very key capability that is needed. And that capability is pub sub, which is a short form for publish, subscribe. The best way to remember it is using a radio tower. The radio tower is constantly broadcasting, right? You are subscribing to a radio station, right? So that way it's decoupled. The radio tower doesn't know who all are listening to that radio station, right? It's just transmitting those waves. You want it to subscribe to it, catch that wave, and listen to that radio station. So it's totally decoupled. Decoupled because the publisher doesn't even know who the subscriber is. Now you'll say, isn't that a bad thing? Well, in IT, it's actually a good thing. In IT, decoupling is very good because it allows your systems to change and not create that dependency. So if I added 3 more data elements and I'm broadcasting that, I'm publishing it, but I don't need to know who are those 5 systems which need that. Because every time I add a 6th one, then I have to update and let them know, and then it adds more work. So if I'm publishing and saying, I've got this change, this event in which 10 rows has changed, whoever wants it, take it, right? So you're publishing that JSON object or that JSON event, which was created by Qlik Replicate, and publishing it to Kafka. Kafka is the most standard default way of pub sub, and you publish it to a Kafka broker, and you will write a Kafka consumer, which will consume that JSON object. And instead of a radio station number, 98.6 FM, here there's a topic. You will say customer information, and it has a namespace as a long string, which is the topic. You'll say, anytime any changes occur with that customer, I want to subscribe to it, to this namespace or this Kafka topic. And Qlik Replicate will publish it to Kafka. Kafka will publish it. Your IT system as a Kafka will write a Kafka consumer, which will pick up that message, right? But the beauty of it is it's decoupled. So whoever wants that customer change can subscribe to it. Whoever here means whatever system wants that change can write that Kafka consumer and that message. Even your system which generated that change, the database where that change occurs, is totally decoupled. It doesn't know which are those 5 downstream systems which need that change. So tomorrow, if I want to add a 6th one, I don't have to let the database team know or do any changes or anything. No, it's fire and forget. So you want to add 10 consumers, no problem. Database doesn't care because it's not going to add any load to it. Qlik Replicate detected that change, published it to Kafka. You're just going to keep on adding Kafka consumers and be able to detect that change in that customer information. Because it's decoupled, and the reason why we want decoupled is because it gives you agility. It gives you the speed which you want to innovate and you want to bring changes in your IT system. Right? So they'll say, why do you want loose coupling? Say, because that will give you the agility. As and when you want to add downstream systems, you don't have to inform other team or you don't have to make any changes. You will be able to absorb those changes, right? So that's why that is a preferred way or a new way of designing event-driven architectures where you are detecting the change, you're propagating that change by publishing it onto a Kafka topic, and then downstream systems are consuming it. Right? So this, the CDC and the PubSub, those two combined are a very powerful pattern to publish data and build an event-driven architecture. This is very important. So anytime, and we'll do case studies, you'll see there are different ways of doing it. But one way of doing it is using event-driven architecture, which is using CDC. CDC capability could be provided natively by your database provider or your database vendor or the company which is providing that software, and it's publishing it onto Kafka. This is very, very important. So we'll keep practicing it, but this is the most preferred way because it gives you that agility, that flexibility to publish and share information internally within IT systems. You cannot use this pattern externally because these Kafka consumers and Kafka, they're all internal to your IT system. You cannot write a Kafka broker where some other third party able to connect to that Kafka broker because that Kafka broker will be behind a firewall. So it will stop and restrict all that communication because it's a security threat if you allow external parties, third parties to consume and listen to that Kafka topic. It's a big security no-no. That's why you cannot use this pattern as it is for external third parties. This pattern is strictly limited for sharing information in event-driven manner with internal IT systems. It's all internal to that organization. It's between IT internal, one internal IT system to a other internal IT systems. It's very, very important. You cannot share, you cannot subscribe to a Kafka topic and that subscribe is someone outside your firewall, outside of your company is a third party. Do not do that because security will never agree to it. And that's why it is used only for internal. If you want to exchange in an external way, you have to support webhooks. And webhooks underneath is using HTTP protocol, P4 protocol, SFTP, right? Secure File Transfer Protocol. So there are a lot of P's in IT because there are standard predefined steps. And that firewall is enabling to make sure your traffic is secure. Because in one of the sessions, we'll talk about data security as such. And in general, we need to know about security, not just data, but just security 101. So you at least have some strong fundamentals of security because you cannot be an architect and say, well, I'm an architect, but I don't care about security. No, you won't survive on the job. So you need to know some fundamentals of security. So we'll cover that as part of data security. Okay. Any thoughts, comments, any questions? Can anyone summarize me besides Ashish, because he will answer it, I know for sure. But I want to make sure you guys have summarized. Can anyone summarize what is CDC? Why do we need CDC? Right, wrong doesn't matter. Give an attempt.
So Mukesh, CDC for data change, data capture is over there. This is based on the databases level. RDBMS is over there. So if any data is getting changed in our database level, so that time one trigger will be generated for for specific data is changed during that one. So this is for that CDC is over there.
Right.
And for PubSub is over there, like Kafka is over there, means publishing the message, and other side is subscribing that message is over there. So means that's in local like two network internal communication is going on. So we are avoiding the third party involvement for that PubSub communication is over there. So basically, this is loosely coupled, and this is means when we are submitting any messages to our topics, so we need not to worry about means how subscriber is consuming that message. So producers should not be aware about a subscriber means how they are consuming and what how many number of subscribers over there.
Okay, very good, very good. Anyone wants to add anything? Simpesh, are you taking notes or are you just remembering what I'm saying?
No, just remembering what you have said.
I just want to make sure, if it's a challenge remembering, then, we need to cover techniques which will help your memory. Because I want all of you to participate and minute break to just summarize and refresh or things that you didn't understand. Please do not hesitate to ask any question. No question is a stupid question. Probably if you have a question, others would have that question. So you're doing favor on others by asking question because others probably have that same question. You are just the brave one to ask first. We'll take a 1 or 2 minute break. I'll be back, but just need to step for 1 minute. I'll be back.
So anyone can tell us how streaming data will be work on that PubSub methodology?
Yeah, I'm back. So what was the question, Tapesh?
Okay, I'm just curious about that streaming data, how it work in that event-driven model.
Yeah, very good question. So in IT, there are a lot of tools to do similar things, but slightly different way, right? So when it comes to streaming data, right? Let's do a quick revision. It's a very good question. So I'm glad you asked, right? How do you integrate or move streaming data, right? Because we cover different type of data. So before I answer that, let's do a quick revision. Can anyone give me an example of streaming data? What is streaming data?
Like we are streaming this session in YouTube.
Yeah, that is live streaming as well, right? But in practically in IT, an example of streaming data could be your stock data, right? It's changing its value every second. The weather sensor data, sensor data is streaming data as well. Social media is also streaming data. Constantly, Twitter or X are being published. Facebook posts are being published, right? But weather data, sensor data, remote patient sensor data, right? You are remotely monitoring a patient, we get lecture in real time, right? It's changing every second. That is streaming data. And what you're streaming is from the client where that information is being generated. The patient is in a remote room and the information is it needs to be sent to a central location. Streamed or as when that is occurring. So you're moving it as and when that data is created over there and you're streaming it or you're sending it. So streaming data or fast data is the same thing because you're sending it fast, right? As and when you're sending changes happening, you're sending it, you're not accumulating it. So there are so do that and collect it. So in the Azure world, there is IoT streaming, right? So there's something called as Internet of Things. I'm sure everyone has heard that. The best example is your fridge, which has a temperature, how much milk is remaining. Do you need to order milk and so on? So it has a sensor. It's detecting the milk level, right? It's taking a image of what's happening, and it's then streaming it and sending it to your mobile app as such. But it's constantly streaming information. If the fridge temperature drops, alert you, right? Or if your room temperature drops, if you're using a thermostat, that is also an example of an IoT device. It's a sensor, it's sensing temperature. So if it drops below a certain threshold, then it will alert you on your mobile. So how do you send that information? It is generating that where the temperature was detected, or room where that ECG or that blood pressure was detected, and sent to the central location. Central location could be, a security monitoring solution. It could be a hospital facility. Could be anything. So there are different streaming tools to be able to do that. In the Azure world, Microsoft Azure has capability called as IoT streaming, right? So you put that device, and the device will publish messages to the web, and your IoT streaming cable will address the central location. And that's what IoT streaming is. So that is only on Azure, right? But if it's outside Azure, you want to be able to monitor and get streaming data. There's an open source tool for it called Apache N-I-5. It does a lot of prime capability where on that client, on that sensor, you have a client which will connect to an Apache NiFi server. And this
We are not able to hear you.
disconnected. Not fond at what point I got disconnected, but we were talking about streaming devices, so I'm not sure if you heard all of it. So I was
Yes,
asking a
Mukesh,
question.
till
Yeah.
just started NiFi.
Okay, I got disconnected after Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
No problem. So I was saying, right? So on the end client, where the IoT sensor is, you'll have a Apache MiniFi, MINIFI, which will talk with Apache NiFi server. You get all the streaming in that NiFi server, and then NiFi will ETL it, or it can write to a Kafka topic. That NiFi server is within your data center, so you can pretty much do whatever you want to do. And if it's the other use case, did you hear about the social media analytics, subscribing to social media post? Did you hear that part? No? Okay. So social media analytics is another use case where you will subscribe to you'll subscribe to social media post, which is fast changing as well. In that case, you will write a simple client which is subscribing to those APIs, and then you'll just get that data and you'll write to a NoSQL database. So the question is, I'm writing a consumer which I'm polling through APIs, and I'm writing to a NoSQL database. Why should streaming data go to a NoSQL database? Why not RDBMS? Anyone wants to answer that? We covered that in the NoSQL session.
Because it is unstructured.
Yeah, so why NoSQL? Nowadays, you can put unstructured data as a blob in an RDBMS as well. But yes, it is unstructured, but why it has to be NoSQL? The answer is right, but the reason it's a little bit more accurate. What's the big
So
deal
you want
about
to
semi-structured data that you want to have it in NoSQL? I can RDBMS as well. Why NoSQL?
because of fast write.
Yes. Why is it fast right in the NoSQL? These are all
Because we are
interview
not
questions, right?
validating.
The interview is
We
going
are
to
not
exactly
validating.
ask.
We are
Exactly,
not
because you're
validating the
not
data.
validating. Right. So it's fast because you're skipping that validation step. Because, if you're missing one field in it, you know, fine, you're not caring about it. You're still going to insert that record, that row in that table. Whereas if it was RDBMS, and if that row was, if that column was mandatory, and if you don't have a value for it, it will not insert that record. So, but to determine whether to insert or not, it is doing that check. So for every insert, it is doing that check. That check is adding latency. So streaming data default, it will be NoSQL database because it's not doing data validation.
But Mukesh,
Okay.
one question, like similar to
Yeah.
in NoSQL, try to do that, data write in SQL without validation. That happen, and it will give
In RDBMS,
yeah in RDBMS.
yeah, see the RDBMS were built and designed that way, right? So you have to always define this database schema, or you have to define the table structure. At the time of definition of that table structure, you're defining, is this mandatory? Is it nullable? Or is it a null field? Null field means no entry, no data is acceptable. Right? So when you create a database, it will say, is this nullable, or is it no data in it is valid? So that's how they were designed for it. So now, if you want to change it, you're fundamentally changing the structure, because there are a lot of use cases you need to have that validation, right? So if you turn it on and off, then it will cause too much confusion and more configuration work. So if you need that validation, use an RDBMS. If you don't need it, use a NoSQL database, right? So the good thing is most of these database providers, they have a NoSQL offering. So if you have a use case in which validation is not needed, just use a different product. So Oracle has NoSQL databases, Azure has Cosmos DB, So there are different alternatives by the same company, and the company, the way you look at it is it's all revenue, right? So they'll say, oh, if that's the use case, use a different product. That's what they'll tell you.
Yes, Mukesh, you mentioned in the past a lot of the video publishing, news, TV programs and things pretty much are on non-SQL databases because you don't really need any verification back from the systems.
Exactly. In cases of videos and so on, like videos is a large file. You can easily go into terabytes of data within few hours, if not days. The standard for storing, so just want to make sure everyone is clear. JSON XML is semi-structured. It's not unstructured data. It's semi-structured because it still has a structure to it, which is defined by the JSON scheme or the XML schema. But you see, there is some structure to it. It's not totally amorphous or it's like structureless as compared to an image or a video. Image or a video is unstructured. So when it comes to storing unstructured data, you would store that in an object storage like Azure Blob, or you'll store it on file server, and you'll store the metadata for it in a database. So you will store the link to that file, to that video file in a database, or you'll store who generated it, who's the artist for it, or you will store that metadata so you can query and search for it, saying, okay, show me this in the past, which was a live performance by Sonu Nigam. So every time when you're generating it, you're adding an artist as the metadata keyword and you're putting that in a database. So anytime you're going to say, okay, show me all the performances in the past by Sonu Nigam, you're writing a SQL type query, depending on which database it is. If it's ANSI SQL compliant, probably it's an RDBMS. You'll say, okay, select star, and select everything from this table or this database schema, which has bunch of tables where artist is equal to quotes Sonu Nigam. It'll give you all the rows where Sonu Nigam performed, and it will tell you these are the 10 rows in which Sonu Nigam is the artist. And each of those 10 will have that hyperlink or link which is pointing to that file share which has that large video file. Because the whole purpose why we want to store it in a database so that you can search for it. But when you are putting that data in a database, you're not searching within a segment of that file. You can't run a SQL query on an image. Video is nothing but a collection of images. So you can't write a SQL query saying, okay, show me the exact time segment in that 10-minute video where Sonu Nigam started singing. Before that, there was music. You can't write a query for it. So if I can't query that unstructured data, there's nothing the database can do, right? Because it's just storing it, occupying space, and you're going to, run out of space fairly soon. So the trick for that is store the metadata. Remember what is metadata? Metadata is nothing but data or information about that data. So here, artist is the metadata or the information about that video performance. And you store that in the database because when you are searching, your search parameters is nothing but those columns corresponding to that metadata fields in that database. Does that make sense? Okay. So moving on, we covered streaming data, how to move streaming data. We covered the CDC, we covered Kafka, right? So Kafka is a very good topic by itself. I would say Google what is Kafka. You'll find tons of short videos on YouTube on what is Kafka. Essentially, what you need is what is the capability? The capability is PubSub. Right? So you want to read more about it, but it should be a must keyword on your CV. There are a lot of books
Mukesh,
on Kafka.
could you
but
put it
all
on the
you need is what
notes?
is Kafka.
Sorry, how do you spell it?
Yeah, let me do that. Yes, Kafka. Puneet, it will be very important for you as well because anytime you're testing it, there'll hardly be a solution which doesn't have Kafka in it. Let me put it on the chat.
Yes, got it. Thank you.
You got someone put it. Okay, I
Mukesh,
can't find there's the chat.
uh,
Yes.
Mukesh, I'll take this opportunity to just ask you the tool you mentioned. I mean, that to download the book. And another thing is like you mentioned in the last session, Azure Data Factory is also keyword, or you need to understand that. And like today, Kafka. So first thing is that if you can share any recommendation of the book, we like for data architect, which we can go through in parallel,
Yes. Yeah.
and you can also
Yeah.
give that
I'll
site
do.
name from where we can download.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And
There's Library Genesis. You can download any ebook on it, and it's amazing. Like any book I want. It's not only IT books, it's like any book, medical, nursing, any topic you want. You can download any books, even fiction books as well. So I'll send that link. I'll post it in that WhatsApp channel. So that way you can search for it and I'll find a good Kafka book, which will make it easier for you to learn and understand Kafka. I usually like A-Press books because these books are written by professionals who have working IT knowledge, as compared to some authors who have very theoretical textbook knowledge. Those are like terrible, boring books to read. But I'll find a good A-Press book for Kafka and share it with you all.
Mukesh, uh, one book,
Yes.
because there could be tons of book, and probably we'll not be able to go through all of them. But one recommended book for data architect, probably which you have gone and that's very good to go through. And
Yeah,
plus the
there are very few books. There are one or two. There are few I've referred to. But unfortunately, they don't cover all the aspects. They will cover some of the aspects. So there's not one book which will have everything, but there are few reference books. One of them is that data publishing, data management group. Uh, I'll share those books.
okay.
But those will be, I think, like 200, 300 pages. Whatever I've said, it will have links, and it will be very helpful to you as well. So I'll dig up those books. I'll find those books and share it with you. Since we have few minutes left, there were topics space related to data integration, and so there's a new emerging trend to share information, and so the way what we did external file share. That you want to monetize your data, you want to make revenue of the data that you are sharing. So right now, and you get as been there for 20+ years, it is the most brilliant way. Now there is a new trend. Trend is called data. Essentially, let me put it this way: you can see your base in a database. It SFTP. Answer is no, but I want you to think why.
Hi, can you please repeat the last part of it? I couldn't, the voice was breaking up.
User to my internal
Yes,
database.
Mukesh, we are not able to hear
Sending.
properly.
Okay, so the question is, if I want to share the data, let me one. No?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you
Can you hear me
repeat
now?
the last part, few sentences I couldn't hear?
Yes. So the way we are with vendors, the database, we're using an ETL tool to create a file extract, and we send the file extract to SFTP. That is the standard pattern of sharing information. Question is, instead of using an ETL tool, spending the ETL tool, having another SFTP software, doing all these things, why can't I just add that external party with which I'm sharing those files, give them access to an internal database and share the information? Why can't we do that? Because that way I'll save the cost of an ETL tool, I'll save the SFTP tool cost as well, and they will just get access to the data they need. And that way I don't have to move the files, I can just share the data. Can we do that? Yes or no? The answer is no. The question is why? Why can't we do that? Why don't we typically do that?
Is it because of security reason or getting an internal
Yes.
access?
Yes,
Yeah.
security is, but specifically, what about security? Yes, it is right. It is not secure, but what? What? So let's say I'm a user. What will I do with it, right? I mean, what can I do with your database? Why is it insecure?
Is it getting the access to the internal network?
Yes, because I have to create a username. So every database, you need to have a username password for it, or you can have it integrated with your identity access management solution or Active Directory. So I need to have a user account. So I'll create an internal username password for that third party, so they will get it. So now they're internal within my system. I can manage access. So I created an user account, which is okay. Many companies are okay with doing that. Yet, I still don't want to give them database access. Why?
Security reasons, mainly.
Yes, security is the answer again. But exactly what about security? So if you have a tough interviewer, they will ask you this question. If the interviewer says, "Okay, security good," they will not dig deeper. But I want you to understand, what about security? The main thing
Maybe
is,
they
if this
they will get
Mhm.
access to the data. They will get access to the
Yes,
data and they will
they will
manipulate
get
it or maybe
access.
misuse it.
Yes,
PII or
yes,
PHI data, they may get access to it as well. Or
yes. That is right. So what would happen is, you could, let's say, now this supplier will inventory as well, right? Because the table, putting my in one table. Now, if I have to restrict access to only the rows for that particular supplier, I have to do more work now, right? And if anyone misses that configuration, I've exposed a lot more than I needed. That is a security problem, right? That's one issue. Second issue is, what if they change anything? Right? I have to make sure it is read-only access. I have to make sure the access is restricted only to their data. So in database, there's something called as a view. You can create a view which will which will trigger a stored proc and only populate the data for that vendor. And then it would be a read-only view. So I can do that that way, but it's not a preferred practice. And the reason given is security. No one will elaborate on it, but security will say, no, I don't like third-party vendors coming into our systems, because most of the time you have to manage that access, right? And you need tools to be able to do that, and then that adds to the cost. But more than the tool, it's the process and making sure, what if you add another table? Do they get access to it or not? What if they run a query when the system is performing something important? You have to restrict what time they run that query, so it can have an adverse impact on your data, because they can run a read-only SQL query, which will bring your entire database down. So it will impact your day-to-day working. So there are a lot of unknown variables which you cannot control. So anything unknown which you cannot control is a security risk. And that's why it's a forbidden practice where you don't give access to that database. The emerging trend is that although you don't give them an access to that database, but you create a replica or a copy of that data and you give them access to that database sandbox. So if they break anything or if anything changes, impact your performance because it's a replica of the data. So these old data replication technologies, they are coming back into focus again because these vendors, they want to stay relevant, right? They can't sell data replication tools because Qlik is the market share provider, right? Qlik has pretty much captured the whole market. So what did they do? They came up with this new way of sharing information through data sharing protocols. So Snowflake, right? It's a cloud data warehousing tool. It has a capability called data sharing. And after that, it's becoming more and more popular to share data using data sharing. And you can meter that data. You can know, okay, how many queries did you run? How many records actually did you use? And you can charge them. You can do data metering based on the data consumption without risking any impact to your existing data, right? Because that was the need. So Snowflake came up with a data sharing capability where it makes a copy of that data. So you are controlling and governing what data is shared because you are deciding what data is shared in that replica. You are approving access, who gets access to what. But most important, you are able to meter that data. How much data did you actually consume? What queries did you write? You're giving them the freedom to write any queries they want, but you can measure how many data rows did it pull or how much data did it use. So that way you can have a new financial model to charge them back. So that's a new way of
Sorry,
doing
Mukesh, to
things now.
interrupt. Do you call it Snow, S-N-O-W? How is it pronounced?
Snowflake, Snowflake. This is my chat window. Trying to still locate my, I can type it over. Yeah, though if anyone wants to type it, that will be fine as well. I don't know where the chat window is. But Snowflake is one way. So remember we talked about different file formats on which you can store data on big data platform. Parquet was one of them. .delta or Delta Lake files was another way. So Databricks, right? They came up with this Delta File Lake protocol. It's called the Delta protocol. They have data sharing as a capability. So there's something called as Delta file sharing. So that's another way where you can share data with external partners, where you'll have a file sharing server. You're pretty much mimicking that same concept, but you're managing it within one application, calling it as data sharing. But you're metering it and you're having that access control and everything. But same concept like Snowflake. So that's a trend. Haven't seen anything in production using it, but just clients investigating and looking at it and understanding, is this something we should use or we should look at it? So we can publish that data to a data marketplace and monetize that data. So clients are constantly looking at adding additional revenues of income streams by monetizing that data. And data sharing is one avenue to do so. So Dinesh, this is something which might be interesting to your clients, where you can propose or make a proposal and say, have you considered data monetization using data sharing and data metering, and how you can monetize the data?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mukesh, what's the main difference you told us about Snowflake and Databricks? Rest all are same. It's like single application or multiple applications, something.
In data, sorry, your voice broke up, Ashish. In difference between what?
Snowflake and Databricks.
Yeah, so Databricks has this .delta files, right? So that's how you store the files on the big data platform, or we call it as the data lake. And that file extension is .delta. And it has a protocol called delta sharing or delta file sharing. So we'll create a file sharing separate instance through which you can govern the access to your third parties, and they will get access to these .delta files, and you can meter it as well. So that is delta file sharing. Whereas if your data source is in Snowflake, then you would want to use Snowflake data sharing capabilities. But if you're not using Snowflake and you're using Databricks, you're using .delta files anyway. So it makes it even more easier to share files with other third parties. Okay. The third, I know we've exceeded the time, but I'll quickly wrap it up. So there's another way to, so this is an emerging trend. I don't expect you to be asked questions about this, but it's a good way to show off your mastery over data architecture, that you know what the trends are. And you can say, well, they'll say, how do you keep yourself updated? Just to see how relevant, and because a good data architect will always stay updated with IT trends. So this is something you can talk about as an emerging IT trend. There's one more thing, one more topic I'll briefly touch upon in 2 minutes. There's another way to share data, and that way is blockchain. You say, what has blockchain to do with data sharing? Actually, blockchain is about data sharing. But you hear Bitcoin and you hear cryptocurrency and everything. But the core capability of blockchain is also called as a distributed data ledger. So it's all about data sharing. So let me state the problem. What problem, when to use, why to use blockchain? Because it has anything to do with data. It is, you have to understand blockchain from that concept. So the concept is you're sharing these data with these vendors through files, right? Many times there are so many partners who need access to that data. But when you're sharing data with that vendor, right, you have a contractual agreement with them, and then you are sharing that data, right? So there are other people who are interested in that data, but you're not going to have those, it's almost next to impossible building those relationships, finding out who needs that data, building those contracts with them, and then providing them access to data, and then being able to monetize it as well in some extent. So the problem statement is there is to share that data. The need is that you want to share it in a secure way. You want to share it in an efficient way, which doesn't impact your performance or anything. But it's almost next to impossible knowing who needs to have that data need. So in the past, we've had data marketplaces where if you're Snowflake has a data marketplace. You will say, if anyone needs this type of customer data, I'm willing to sell it, right? And then that way you can say, yeah, I need this. I'll buy it. I'll pay for it, right? With blockchain, many times, you're lacking the trust in the system on who to share this data with. So for example, you're a bank, you need to send data to a different country. But you don't know the bank in that country, if that bank is legitimate or not. What if it's a fraudulent bank and I just created a fictitious bank and then I'm receiving that money and then I run away after a year, right? So now there's too much liability on the bank. So when it comes to data sharing, there's a lot of mistrust in that system. So it takes years to build those contracts and build that ecosystem. And there's something called as a SWIFT protocol. And that SWIFT organization identifies and saying, okay, are you a SWIFT member? You're a registered bank in this branch. So it's a worldwide network, right? So when the war started with Ukraine and Russia, the first thing America wanted to do was kick Russia out of that SWIFT network. So it can no longer receive international wires because there's no way to validate that, is this a legitimate Russian bank? Because you're knocked out of SWIFT system. So there is that problem where you need to share that information, but you don't know who all it is and whether it's legitimate or not. But the core problem is you need to share that information. The problem is you need to share that information with trustworthy sources. So how do you make sure that who you're sharing that information is trustworthy or not? That problem is solved with blockchain. Blockchain says, well, I'll add this person to my network, to the blockchain. If they are not trustworthy, someone will flag it and others will flag it, and then they will be knocked out of the system. So yes, one or two fraudulent transactions may go through, but then eventually they'll get knocked out of that system. They'll get flagged, right? So you're pooling the trust based on the knowledge of other systems, and you're creating this blockchain. That essentially what blockchain does. So that way, if you want to buy a house, you are going to publish that information on a blockchain, and all the brokers would have access to it, and they will say, I'm interested in buying the house. So it solves a lot of the problems in a fundamental way, but creating those relationships, building those blockchain is painstaking. So blockchain has existed for 5+ years. It's more synonymous with crypto scams now, rather than actually as a genuine good way of sharing information in a trustworthy manner. It's actually used for crypto scams. So it's used to, that word trust is diluted to a certain degree where it's seen with skepticism. And that's why blockchain is not adopted from firms at the IT level to share information. It's solving a totally different problem. It has evolved in a different way with NFTs and all the other things. But it hasn't fundamentally solved the problem yet of sharing information in a trustworthy manner. It will be a few, maybe another 5-10 years, but still there's a lot of money in working in blockchain companies, very volatile as well. So all you need to know from a data architecture is that yes, you can publish and share information on a blockchain. There are different type of blockchains: public blockchain, private blockchain, and you have what's called as a smart contract. And there are different blockchain backbones, Ethereum and so on. So using those smart contracts, you can execute transactions and you can achieve that data sharing. As long as you can talk that for 30 seconds, that's good enough. No one is expecting you to be a blockchain expert, but you just need to know the concept that it's a distributed ledger. Ledger is where everyone makes an entry, but it's a distributed ledger. Anyone outside the organization is making entries. There are a few good use cases for blockchain, but if interested, we'll cover that. But otherwise, it's not too relevant. But just you as a good data architect need to be aware what is the relationship of blockchain with data architecture. Okay. With that, we'll conclude the data architecture part of it. Any questions? Okay, if no questions, we'll end with another mind empowerment technique. So what I'm noticing is you guys need to remember more and be able to summarize it in a quick way. So we all have limited capacities to a certain extent. So does your brain. So to maximize the efficiency of your brain power, you have to understand what is powering the brain. Right? It is the soul which is powering the organs of the body. Brain is just another organ of the body. You're not smart based on the size of the brain. You're smart based on the capacity of your soul to effectively use its organs. So avoid waste. The more waste you can avoid with wasteful thoughts, that will increase your capacity to retain. And a lot of the wasteful thought comes as ill will against others. So if someone says something, the instant reaction is of revenge. The instant reaction is to respond with a similar energy. Someone said negative about you, you respond in a negative way, in an equal or a more proportion in it. You may not respond it in words, you may respond it through your thoughts. In a way, that is also violence, right? You're not saying it through words, but you're wishing ill towards someone. Someone said something, you instantly, your default reaction is hate or mistrust or wishing bad for that person. Once you, and it's not normal to do that, right? Because the soul has been doing that for a long, long time, from one body to another body and so on. So it's become a default behavior and habit. And it's not one individual, it is a society. The society is nothing but a collection of souls, right? People make up society. So it's become a standard default behavior. It's assumed to be a norm. But then the norm is that, we are not able to remember things. Our capacity is severely diminished. So if you want to be able to remember anything, everything, you want to be smarter, you want to be brighter than other people, you need to empower your soul. And the more positive energy you give to the soul, the more it's going to realize its true potential. So if you observe that, you're still observe yourself, right? And if you're still having that, try to replace that negative with positive, right? And use the knowledge of the drama. The other person is just another soul. They're having a bad day. Just because they said such and so doesn't imply that you have to react to it. When you are strong, situations will not impact you, but you will impact the situations in a positive way. But when your soul is weak, situations will have an impact on you. Okay, I'll repeat, this is very important. When your soul is weak, situations will impact you. Someone said something something, it will impact your state of mind. In response, you will trigger these thoughts which will say, how the hell did this person say? Next time I will also teach him a lesson. Let my day come. All this is a natural process. But you have the option, you always have the option, starting from now, where you can change the response. Circumstances may be similar for both the same person, but one can respond in a positive way, where you can forgive and say, fine, I'm more powerful. I'm not who this person says I am. I'm a lot more powerful than what he thinks. I don't even have to explain or justify, because I'm powerful because the Supreme Soul is with me, right? So I don't need to worry about it. It will be like trivial, right? So you won't respond to it, and you will give good wishes to it, because when you are powerful, your soul is powerful. You are the soul, not the body. You are not the I, the ego, you're not in isolation. So when you are powerful, the situation will be impacted by your powerful presence. Your smile is the best answer, but that smile is not, a revengeful smile or a smirk, but it's a genuine smile of wishing good for others, right? So when you are powerful, situations will change. They won't change you, but they will change the situation with your power. So observe yourself, right? There's nothing that you cannot do. You have the power of choice to choose negative versus positive. You have the power to convert negative to positive as well. You have that power. You need to realize and experience that power, use that power. When you start using it, you will get that experience, and then that experience will power other bigger experiences. Because when your mind is filled with this dirt of ill feelings for others, it is reducing your capacity. So once you start wishing well for others, you will notice there will be physical changes in your body. It will start empowering you as well. So try it, because no matter how much I say, until you try it, you're not going to see the difference. Try it for 3 weeks at least. You'll feel good about yourself, that you're not responsive to events, but you're more stable within yourself. Your state of mind is not easily fluctuated by others' response, but your stable mind will positively impact the situation. So this is another very powerful technique, but you have to try it. Try it. If it doesn't work, share it, but try it, because this will make you a lot more stronger than you already think you are. You have the power within you. It's just the question of when you realize the power. Each one of you has that power, but you're not using it. Each of you have all those spiritual powers which you see as instruments shown in Durga Matas. You have all of it, but it's just that you're not using it. And an instrument, a power which is not used, it will decay. It will multiply its power once you start using it. The power of patience, the power of smile, the power of love. The more you use it, the more it will multiply. And you will experience these powers growing within you, but it needs to be experienced. It cannot be just said in words. I want each of you to experience it as well, and then you will be able to share it. But try it. Take that first step of determination. Take that first step of faith within you that you have these powers, how to best use them, and start using them. Don't wait for some Shubh Muhurat. If you need to wait for a Shubh Muhurat, tomorrow is a very good Shubh Muhurat, according to what the rest of India says. But don't wait for it. Shubh Muhurat is when you decide to bring positive change in your life. Every moment is auspicious, because you're doing something good with your life and taking it to the next level. So with that, I wish you all well for the coming week as well, and see you next week. Thank you.
Mukesh, you are not available on next week, no?
Yes, sorry. Thanks for reminding me. So yes, next week's session will be on ChatGPT. We'll have another brother talking about ChatGPT. He had talked once about it. I'll be traveling next week, so I won't be able to attend the session either. But please do attend. It will be very informative. Any knowledge about ChatGPT, how to consume it using APIs, how to integrate it with your application. That's something you can ask the speaker or learn from the speaker in the next session. Thanks for that reminder, Ashish.
Mukesh, by any chance, you are in India, going back to UK or somewhere else?
Yes, I'm in India till Saturday. I'll be traveling Sunday morning. Okay. Thank you, all of you. Have a nice week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.